The new Layer of Darkness structure deck came out a couple days ago, and I actually opened it on the channel yesterday. I've had a couple days to kind of look at how this deck works and the type of strategies you can build using the new cards, and one of the decks that I'm really interested in playing is this deck, and this is sort of a Layer of Darkness frog strategy. It's pretty crazy, but it actually turns out that it's really, really good at board control, maybe even more so than the deck that I've been playing for the last couple weeks now. So anyway, let's get in here, and the main thing that we're focusing on here is this Lilith card, Lilith, Lady of Lament. This card is incredible, so we're playing 3 copies of it. This thing's really cool. So it comes out at 1000 attack. It's not always just going to be a 2000 attack level 3 monster. I suppose if you bring it back with like Monster Reborn, it comes out at 2000 attack. But in general, your normal summon this thing, it has 1000 attack, and then you contribute a dark monster to reveal 3 normal traps in your deck, and then you randomly, well, your opponent picks one randomly, and then it gets set to your side of the field. The other 2 go back in the deck. And it's sort of like a pantheism of the Monarchs, but for normal traps. And there's a lot of good normal traps in this deck. I mean, obviously there's a Paleozoics, but there's cards like D-Barrier as well that are really strong. And this card's so good because the Layer of Darkness field spell that we'll get to in a little bit, it lets you tribute your opponent's monsters instead of your monsters. And that's so good because it means that this thing's like an out to like any board pretty much. Because all you have to do is normal summon it when you have the field spell up. And then if your opponent wants to do anything, well, they have to respond right away, because if they don't do anything, like let's say your opponent has an Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon, well, you can just use the Lilith, and because it tributes the monster as cost, you can tribute the Vortex Dragon, and they now no longer have a chance to respond to the effect. And that makes this thing really hard to deal with. It's also a quick effect, which is super stupid, so if you want to wait until your opponent's turn, you can just summon this thing, pass, and then when they make a board, you can tribute their cards. And yeah, this thing's crazy. So that's like the main part of this deck, and it gets you to those trap cards that you want to see so often. The other card that we're playing that's from the structure deck, if that's new in the monsters, is this Wicked Warden card, and this guy's not as good, so it has a tributing effect. It's not a quick effect though, which makes it a lot worse. So when this tributes a guy, you just get to draw a card, and that's kind of interesting. This thing also acts as a terraforming. When it's in your hand, you can discard to add the field spell. So if you already have a field spell, it gives you a free draw. If you don't have a field spell and you have a Lilith and this guy, you can then tribute it to get to the field, or you can discard to get to the field spell, and that's pretty useful. So just 2 of that guy though, because he's not a quick effect, so he's not quite as powerful. Next up, we have the normal frog engine. So we have, of course, 3 Swap Frog, very, very strong card, and it's kind of your best opener with Lilith. We also have 3 copies of Dupe Frog, still the best frog. Now that we have the 7th, or it's not really the 7th frog, but now that we have the Double Cross Frog revealed, I can confidently say that this card has not been power crept. We'll still be playing it even when that card comes out. And then lastly, we have 2 copies of the Ronin Totem, so very good there. It also should be noted, if you want to, when you have cards like the Ronin Totem, and you have a Lilith and the field spell, if your opponent doesn't have any monsters that you want to tribute, the field spell actually changes everything to a dark type. That's why you can tribute your opponent's cards, and you can also do that with your own stuff. You can kind of take advantage of that by tributing a Rodent Totem on the board. You can even tribute a Totally Awesome to get its effect, and that's kind of neat. It will make the Dupe Frog miss timing though, just like everything else in this world, so don't try to do that. But you can tribute Rodent Totem, get some trap cards, and get your engine going. For the hand traps, just 2 Ash Blossom and 2 Ghost Ogre. These are pretty optional. I happen to like them a lot. It really helps when you go second. But if you can't afford these cards, I'd say just don't buy them and just play something different. I think Eater of Millions is still a good choice in this deck. I think any more like just random Paleozoic trap cards could be good as well. But I like these cards a lot, so we're going to play them in my build. And next up, we have the field spell, Layer of Darkness. So there's 2 big parts about this card, but it has 3 effects. The first big part is that it changes everything on the field to dark, which means that you can use your Lilith and you can use your Warden to actually tribute your opponent's cards. The second thing is that it lets you tribute your opponent's cards. Jeez, I'm having so much trouble talking. It lets you tribute your opponent's cards for your effects. That's really helpful. And there's some like kind of funky stuff you can do with that in like other decks, but in this deck, it's mainly just the 2 Layer of Darkness monsters we're playing. And then lastly, you can special summon tokens in the end phase. That effect doesn't come up too much, but it is kind of helpful for making link monsters. We also have 2 copies of Pot of Desires. This card's incredible in this deck. You don't really have any cards you care about banishing, so it's pretty good. And we had to cut the Spellbook engine because we added so many more normal summons that we're adding to the deck, so Pot of Desires gives us that like extra draw power that we are lacking now that we don't have the Spellbooks. 1 copy of Scapegoat. It's kind of weird just playing 1 copy of this, but it's been working out so far. I think I understand why Kelvin Tahan played 1 copy of this at YCS Atlanta. It's just like a blowout card when you draw it. If you don't draw it, I mean, it happens. It's just a Saki one of. Just think of it as a Saki one of, just like the next card, which is Monster Reborn. So you kind of have these two one of spells that just like win you the game when you draw them. But with Scapegoat, if you drew two of them, you just like lose the game. And so we're just going to be playing the one copy. For the trap cards, and pay attention, I'll kind of go through here with the normal trap cards we're playing, because the normal trap cards are kind of searchable with Lilith. So we do have the 3 Canadia, fantastic card. We have the 3 Olenoids. Maybe the best Paleozoic out right now is Olenoids, so we're playing 3 of that guy, obviously. I am playing 1 Dinomischus. I always make fun of this card. I really don't like it, but I think in this deck it's fine. It's an okay card to get off the Lilith, and the important thing here is that when you use the Lilith effect, your opponent doesn't know which trap you get. So if you happen to reveal like one of each of these cards, your opponent wouldn't actually know which one you got, which means that they don't know quite what to play around, which I think gives a pretty interesting dynamic. So we're going to play the 1 Dinomischus. It's also pretty good to search with the Opabenia, which is something that I always miss when I play this deck without the Dinomischus. I just don't like this card in conventional builds. And the other cool thing about that card in this deck is that if you happen to have multiple copies of the field spell, they don't really do anything, so you can discard them from your hand. So that's kind of neat. The other normal trap card we're playing is Dimensional Barrier. You can play some crazy stuff. You can play Mind Crush if you want. You can play Mere Force if you want. The only normal traps we're playing, though, are the Paleozoics and the D-Barrier. It gives us a really pinpointed sort of pool of trap cards that we always know we're getting something good, and I like that a lot. And I had to cut it to 2 because we had to make room for all this stuff, but you can get to it pretty reliably. And we have 2 copies of Anti-Spell. This card is really good, although our build does play some spell cards. You don't want to get too bogged down with this effect, but it's still pretty good. We have a lot of deck thinning, so you'll likely see it in your opening hand, and yeah, it's pretty good. Lastly, we have the 3 copies of Solemn Strike, 1 Warning, and 1 Judgment. Obviously, these cards are insane, and Judgment probably should be banned. Well, maybe not. Maybe that's not true. Pretty much no one's playing Judgment except for the trap decks, and trap decks aren't the most popular decks, so I'm not sure if Judgment actually warrants a ban. Every time I use this card, though, it just feels really unfair, and I don't know if that's necessarily healthy, but that's the main deck. You got a lot of different interactions going on there. The main 2 cards are Swap Frog, obviously, and Lilith, which is like your main control thing, and yeah, I like it a lot. For the extra deck, we have 3 copies of Toad. Like I said, you can tribute this card with Lilith's effect when you have the field spell out, because it's a dark monster, then you can add back stuff. That doesn't come up all the time, but if you like use a Toad effect and you still have it on the board, and the Lilith is sort of like a board control card, and because it's a quick effect, if you happen to get to Toad and a Lilith, it's kind of hard for your opponent to actually do stuff, because the Toad will negate one thing, Lilith can it doesn't negate something, but it gets rid of something, but potentially stops an Exceed play or a Link play, and then you have more advantage gained because you're getting a trap card to the board, your opponent loses a card, you get a card with Toad. It's just a lot of advantage out of like 2 cards on the board, which is pretty cool. So Toad is at 3, obviously fantastic card. The 1 Opabenia, the 1 that guy, and the Sky Cavalry. Sky Cavalry is really good. We're not playing the Blue Boy, so usually you'll probably just make one of these 5, but when you need to make Sky Cavalry, it's really clutch, and I think of more so than all of the other rank 2s out there, because there's a lot of rank 2s out there, but the Sky Cavalry is definitely like the most important one. Moving on to the Link monsters, we have 2 copies of Miststar Boy. It's obviously really strong. 2 copies of Link Spider, because I feel like I'm never going to buy a Link Creepo at this point, so we're just going to keep playing Link Spiders. So shout out. It's like I'm playing in Europe, kind of. I'll just pretend that I'm playing in Europe so that I have an excuse to not play the Link Creepo. Anyway, Proxy Dragon, Borreload Dragon, and Saryuja Skull Dread. These cards, these 5 right here, obviously all just for the Scapegoat, nothing else. You can kind of make these cards in some other cases, but in general, it's just off of the Scapegoat. And without the Eater of Millions, you're not ever like really worried about like, oh, if I draw a Scapegoat, but I've already used Eater, now I can't use it anymore. You don't have to worry about that because we don't have the Eater of Millions. And then lastly, because I'm just too lazy to change it, we have the 2 Cherries targets, ABC Dragon Buster and Heavy Metal Foes Electromite. These obviously will change on the format. These obviously will change if you're not playing Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries, but I happen to play that in like every deck that I'm playing right now. So these are like the main 2 targets, because it seems to be easier in this deck at least to find extra deck space, not side deck space. So I'd rather just take up the extra deck slots for this instead of putting them in the side deck. Anyway, though, that is pretty much going to wrap up this deck profile. Like I said, I think these cards are cool in this deck. I think the fact that you can just activate the field spell and summon Lilith against like any board and then just immediately tribute one of their cards, I think that's pretty crazy. I don't know how consistent it is. I mean, I can kind of theory craft, and I understand that like sometimes you'll draw a lot of field spells without a Lilith, sometimes you'll draw a bunch of Liliths without the field spells, and I can understand that that's not super crazy, but when you happen to draw just one copy this and one copy this, it's so good. It just breaks apart boards while getting you advantage, and then the Lilith stays on the board, so then on your opponent's turn you contribute a second monster to get another trap card. That's just like such a huge swing in tempo and card economy that it's so hard not to just play it. And anyway though, that is going to wrap up this deck profile. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you later. Let me know what you think of this deck, and also just of splashing the Lair of Darkness archetype into other decks. It can be splashed in decks like Infernoids. I think it's really interesting. There's a lot of other sort of options out there, so let me know what you're splashing it in. Have you tried this deck? Have you tried the other variants? Please let me know in the comments, and I will see you guys later. Goodbye.